Good morning. Welcome to morning meditation. Today is Wednesday, August 5th. Today in our readings, we get this really profound message from the Apostle Paul as he recounts how he almost convinced the original apostles in the early church to recognize that the gospel is for all, not just for one group of people or another, but the gospel is for all. And the way that Paul goes about it is truly a beautiful and inspired way when someone knows, is filled with righteousness and knows that what they're doing is right, but still looks to respect the dignity of those that they hope to correct. And so Paul gives us a great example today. So this week is week number 2 of our student run club, so you might notice this is why I look as I do again on Wednesday mornings. So, but we get a nice little allusion to that in our reading today too. So today's first reading, it comes from the book of Galatians, chapter 2, verses 1 through 2 and 7 through 14. And Paul writes to us today, "Brothers and sisters, after 14 years I again went up to Jerusalem with Barnabas, taking Titus along also. I went up in accord with a revelation, and I presented to them the gospel that I preach to the Gentiles, but privately to those of repute, so that I might not be running or have run in vain. On the contrary, when they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter to the circumcised, for the one who worked in Peter for an apostolate to the circumcised worked also in me for the Gentiles. And when they recognized the grace bestowed upon me, James and Cephas and John, who were reputed to be pillars, gave me and Barnabas their right hands in partnership, that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. Only we were to be mindful of the poor, which is the very thing I was eager to do." So in natural Paul fashion, we get a letter that seems to meander a little bit. It can be hard to follow the sentence structure sometimes of what Paul is writing. You can imagine maybe as he was speaking to his scribe, just getting so excited. There are other parts of Paul's letters where he literally says this. "I am just so excited saying this." So you can imagine him as he's recounting this to a scribe who's writing this down. But let's take this apart a little bit and see what is Paul trying to say to us today. So we know that the Apostle Paul was really although the early church, the very early church, the first apostles were recognizing that Jesus' message was for everyone, Paul was really the apostle that took that message by the horns and just went for it, which is so shocking in his story as we know him as initially a zealot who was really persecuting the early church for not being for not following the tenets of Judaism, and then to become such a champion of the Gentile, the other, right, is truly a remarkable conversion. But we see him come into town today, come into Jerusalem after years and years, right, after 14 years. And he says, "And I came in and I wanted to present the gospel as I had been teaching it," right? I knew, right, Paul is saying, I know that the way I've been presenting the gospel to the Gentiles is effective. It's the right way. He says, "I believe I have a revelation that these Gentiles are meant to be brought in to the family, to the church." But he doesn't just come in and start shouting, Peter and James and John are all wrong, right? He doesn't come in and criticize them publicly, but what does he do? He says, "I presented to them the gospel that I preached to the Gentiles, but privately to those of repute. And later he says, James and Cephas, who is Peter, and John, who were reputed to be pillars. Right? He recognizes that these people, right, the early church, the original apostles, that they are looked on by the early Christians as this is the church. These are our leaders. And Paul knows, although he has been really hit by the Spirit to send this message that this faith is for everyone, he doesn't go out and criticize them publicly and embarrass them and start a public fight, but he goes to them privately. He says, here's what I've been doing, and I think this is the way that we need to go as followers of Jesus Christ. And he says, he went there to those privately to those of repute, so that I might not be running or have run in vain. We wonder what Paul means when he says this, and of course, taking the running analogy. Last year, I was training for a marathon, and it was actually the Easter Vigil, so it was 2 Easter Vigils ago, and just kind of a clumsy accident. I kind of tripped going down some stairs, and I broke my toe, actually. I had just signed up for this half marathon, and so I had to take a couple weeks off of running. Thankfully, it was a pretty minor. It was my pinky toe, and it was something that I could start running on pretty quick, but I had to take a couple weeks off. And initially, I was just so ready to get back into it, so ready to start training for this marathon, that I did 2 very difficult and intense trail runs 2 days in a row. And runners might know that running on trails is not like running on tar. And it's very hard on your joints. And the second day, as I'm going through this run, suddenly I get this terrible pain in my knee. I'm like 3 miles in, and I'm like, well, I'm still going to push this through. I'm still going to run back. I'm still going to do a 10K, right? 6 miles about. And so I pushed through this pain for 3 miles. And what ended up happening was, for the next couple months, I had I had really just hurt my knee so bad that I couldn't run more than a mile. And I had to drop out of the marathon I was planning for. I had to drop out of other races I was planning for. And really, because I had gone so hard, committed so hard, pushed myself so hard, that all the running that I was doing was in vain. And we see Paul recognize this in the way that he approaches his brothers and sisters in faith. That although he knows I have this message that needs to be shared with the world, he knows that if I go in too hard with Peter, with James and John, if I just commit to saying in front of everyone, you're wrong, I'm right, follow me instead, that all of this work that I've done of building up these followers of Christ, these Gentile followers of Christ, all this work that I've done, how I've been building up the church for years, as he says, would be in vain. And I think we can take that and recognize that sometimes we are right? Whether it's in the workplace, whether it's with a relationship, a friendship, with kids, with parents, whatever it is, right? Sometimes we are right, and we know that. But especially as Christians, it's not always about being right, but the way that we honor our brothers and sisters around us. The way that we approach them. The way that we, instead of just wanting to prove that we're right and we're good and we did the correct thing, that we instead approach it by wanting to help others on the way. Because we all know what it's like to feel that someone is telling us, no, they're right, you're wrong, right? And what's our first reaction is so often to shut down. And so for us, in those cases where we say, no, I know this is on my heart and this is true, that we can never forget about the son or daughter of Jesus Christ that's in front of us. To always honor and respect them. Even in those times that maybe we're incredibly frustrated or losing patience. That this is the message of St. Paul for us today. That we always be mindful of those in front of us. So today, and whatever that thing is that frustrates us, that gets us going and saying, no, I've been wronged in this way, or I know that I'm correct in this way, or they're doing this wrong, whatever that is, or we start to feel righteous in a way, that we might remind ourselves to take a step back, to recognize that no matter how frustrated we are, or how wronged we might feel that that person is a son or daughter of Jesus Christ. And that doesn't mean that we don't do what's right for us, but that we do it in a way that respects their dignity as human beings, as we would hope for the many times that we are wrong, that others would treat us with that same charity. So let that be our challenge and our meditation today. Thank you for joining us this morning for morning meditation. We do this Tuesdays through Fridays starting at 9 o'clock. Father Joe will be back from the priest to the clergy retreat tomorrow, and so should be here for morning meditation at 9 a.m. All right, thanks for joining. Peace.